On the Spot with Michelle Makori is brought to you by Prime XBT.
Are the BRICS still planning on launching their own commodity-backed currency intended to rival the dollar? The BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, are meeting in South Africa next month. And there's been much speculation that the plan for the summit was to discuss and announce a common currency, most likely backed by commodities, including gold. Now, that speculation intensified after Russian state television RT reported that the Russian government confirmed that BRICS nations will introduce a new trading currency backed by gold at the August Johannesburg meeting. Well, South Africa has now poured cold water on that idea. South Africa's ambassador to the BRICS says a BRICS currency will not be on the agenda. In a media briefing recently, he said there's never been talk of a BRICS currency, and it is not on this agenda. Meanwhile, India has become increasingly less enthusiastic about the idea. Earlier this month, India's External Affairs Minister pointed out that India might back out from launching a BRICS currency, with its main priority being its national currency, the rupee. So perhaps the excitement over the return to some form of gold-backed currency has been a tad premature. Well, my next guest was never that optimistic that this BRICS currency would happen, at least not at this meeting. Lobo Tiggre joins us to discuss this development and what it means for gold and the dollar. Lobo is the editor of the Independent Speculator. He has decades of experience in the mining sector, including as a senior investment strategist at KC Research, and is a favorite here on Kitco. Welcome back, Lobo.
I'm happy to be with you. Happy to be with you, Kitco audience. Let's dig in. This is a fun topic.
Always good to see you, Lobo. Let's unpack this because, Lobo, we are getting mixed messages on this currency. Russia and Brazil, big supporters of this, they've indicated that a common currency backed by commodities is being developed and is needed if the bloc aims to challenge what they call the Western dominance of global finance. Brazil's President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva and the Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, both very vocal supporters of this idea. But then we heard from South Africa's ambassador at large for Asia and BRICS recently, Anil Suklal, and he said that there's never been talk of a BRICS currency and that it's not even on the agenda. I'm quoting him here. What we have said and what we continue to deepen is trading in local currencies and settlement in local currencies. And India has the rupee doing very well against the dollar and also seems to have backed off this idea. So, Lobo, what do you make of these developments? Is this a definite no on a gold-backed currency coming out of the summit?
Well, if the people hosting the conference are telling you this is not on the agenda, I think that is not too much of a stretch to take that at face value. Generally, I'm pretty skeptical of government spokespeople on most any topic, as you probably know, Michelle.
Yeah.
But, that doesn't seem like much of a stretch. I think if we pull back and look at the bigger picture here, the mixed messages, it's interesting. And you mentioned how you framed the question well. Russia, of course, has an interest. I mean, this is a country at war. This is a country that, if not at war directly with the West, got smacked down when the dollar was so-called weaponized. So, of course, they have an incentive. Now, that doesn't mean they actually have to do anything. Even just talking about it, propaganda has all kinds of value in a war setting. So, it's easy to see an interest on their part in pushing an idea that would do any harm to their enemies. No matter how much or how little, words are cheap. It's easy to talk. So it makes sense that you would get something like this. I think what gives this idea so much power and why it grabs so many people is because it actually does make sense. So I'm here, you know me, and I'm here to be the rain on the parade. Don't buy the rumor on this. But it does make sense. And the gold-backed part even makes sense, which is something we're specifying, even to the degree that some of the ministers and people involved had talked about a new BRICS currency. Fine, it's an idea that they are clearly considering, even if it's not on the agenda for this meeting. But very few have even mentioned gold or the commodities. It's more the general idea of a BRICS currency, a competitor to the dollar, that has gained some traction. But one of the criticisms, my friend and fellow Puerto Rican, Brent Johnson, the dollar milkshake guy, I'm sure you've interviewed him. Right?
Yeah.
He talks about how difficult it is to dethrone the dollar, and how, it's not just the world's reserve currency. It's also this deep liquid market, the treasuries, the debt that is international debt that is based in dollars. The third world countries will have dollar debt, denominated debt. So all of that, it's a huge thing to change. It's difficult to overturn.
And we have had Brent on recently, Lobo. In fact, he said, do not confuse desire with ability.
Yes.
That's a good quote.
Yes.
I remember that from him.
So that's where I'm going. It must be something in the Puerto Rican air here. This idea makes sense. But here's where I push back against Brent and maybe give a little olive leaf to the gold bugs out there, my fellow gold bugs out there. In that part of the problem with the BRICS-backed currency is, if you're Russia, do you really trust the Chinese? You do business with them because you have to, or vice versa. Or, so these are friends of convenience, not of deep cultural connection or something like that. And so real quick, and therefore the gold is the answer. Like, how do you have a BRICS-based currency if the BRICS countries don't trust each other? Well, you don't have to trust each other and what you're doing with your money behind closed doors if it's in gold and if it's stored in multiple countries. And, you'll be checking on each other. Trust, but, trust but verify, the Russians saying. So it actually makes sense. I mean, big picture-wise, I actually would go out on a limb and say, I think this will happen, Michelle. I think if not a BRICS-based currency, then somebody else will do something like this to take the dollar on. And it makes sense for BRICS as the front-running challenger to do it. And for the reasons we've just been saying, I think it makes sense for them to back it with commodities, to back it with something real that they can check on each other so they don't have to trust each other. So I actually think this is great. This is a wonderful thing. But what you said in your intro is the key point. It doesn't tell me what I want to invest in today. It doesn't affect what happens today. Like, even if they did announce it in the August meeting, it would be years before anything actually happened. Like, how long have the central banks been talking about CBDCs? Our other great friend, right?
Well, yeah.
So,
well, those are probably approaching faster than we would like. But I get your point, Lobo, that it takes time from an idea to go into conception and to actualization. And certainly the notion that because these countries don't necessarily trust each other, don't necessarily have that much faith in each other's currencies, it would make sense for there to be some kind of commodity, perhaps even a basket of commodity backing this new currency. And that's where all the buzz and the excitement came from, because it makes so much sense. But you're saying we have to take the South African ambassador at his word and take that as a definitive no for the summit.
But it's not just him. It's also the Indians. I mean, the Indian statement, in a way, is a bigger shocker, Michelle. I mean, the South African ambassador, and by the way, Michelle, where were your secret sources in South Africa? Come on, you should have had this story first.
Maybe I did.
All right. But anyway, he's just saying it's not on the agenda. That's actually a much milder statement than what India came out with. They said they don't favor a BRICS currency at all. So they still need persuading even to get in that boat. That's a bigger hurdle to come up against. Sorry, one more thing on this. I had readers write in about this before South Africa and before India poured rain on the parade, besides me. I had readers write in and say, what will happen to gold when they announced the BRICS currency in August? Like, people took it as a given. People thought this was going to happen. And the tone of some of these messages wasn't just that they were going to announce their intention to design or consider whatever, but like it would be a fait accompli. Like, here it is. Here's our new BRICS gold-backed currency. People thought this was coming this August. So clearly, you really, you can't get ahead of your skis on things like this. You can't get too excited about some big idea that makes sense, and let it persuade you that you know something that you only hope for or wish for or suspect.
Well, what was surprising to me is that they said it's not even on the agenda. I would not think that they would announce the currency, that they would have their ducks in a row so quickly, but I thought that it would at least be a topic on the agenda for them to discuss. So if we take the South African ambassador literally at his word there. Sorry,
I'll just go on the record and say that surprised me too.
Yeah, I thought that they'd at least talk about this,
Yes,
figure things
yes.
out, and sort of make some progress in this direction. But, you know, for it to believe him verbatim, he said it's not even on the agenda. Just to, you know, play a bit of devil's advocate here, Lobo, could this maybe be an intentional tactic to create confusion, a diversion, allow the BRICS to work on this more discreetly till they're really ready? Could that maybe be a plan, or am I being too sophisticated and strategic here?
Well, it could be. You know, it's one of those questions that we can gather on and consider, but we wouldn't really know. We can invent stories, and I don't know how useful that will be for the audience. I would tend to think not, however. You know, if you ask me to guess, I would say no. If they really didn't want this getting out there until they were ready, the statements that we have had, they didn't need to come out. Or China, or, you know, could have come out sooner and said, you know, something definitive. You know, I have no trouble at all believing that the Chinese or the Russians would say one thing and do the other. So the fact that they've let the story run, you could say, well, it's useful and they just let it run. It's easy to believe. But if they really didn't want it out there, I think they would have taken more active measures to suppress the story. Just my guess.
Well, we've discussed why it's in Russia's incentive to create this narrative, because obviously it weakens the dollar. But where is China on this? I mean, obviously China also has an incentive to weaken the dollar, but what have we heard from China recently on this idea?
Well, let me get Xi Jinping on my cell phone here. I have him on speed dial, and I'll let you know. No, obviously, we're not going to be able to answer something like that very clearly.
But have there been any public comments from China on this narrative? We do know that China continues to buy gold. They bought gold for the 8th consecutive month in June.
Yes,
they've been on a buying spree to, I think, 165 tons this year. So if we haven't had any official comment from Beijing, does this maybe tell us something?
Absolutely. I don't know if you need me for this interview. You're doing a great job, Michelle. No, that's exactly right. You know, actions speak louder than words. And if you look at what they're doing and what's going on, I think it's very clear. And after that, we can only assume. I don't even want to talk about assume, but we can infer, inferred resources. We can infer from their interest that and that they haven't disputed or thrown their own cold water on it, that they are on board with this. They're just being very inscrutably Asian in their diplomacy here. They're not letting their cards show at all, verbally.
So why do you think this is not happening and not even being discussed at the summit? Again, if we're taking the South African ambassador at his word, why not?
That is a good question. And it would clearly be more in Russia's interest to hurry things. But maybe other people are not quite ready to go on. This is a negotiation. It's a bloc. You know, Modi was just in the U.S. You know, who knows if they, what pressure they put on him when they invited him into tea and cookies. Mm-hmm. And it was interesting that they sort of started changing their tune after that U.S. visit. The Chinese in the U.S. have been in fairly intense recent negotiations. We've had high-level visits over there. You know, who knows what they talked about. Clearly, the U.S. does not want to hear any of this de-dollarization stuff going, and it may be that they offered some incentives for them to keep quiet. Another whole way of looking at it is they're not ready yet. Maybe they thought they would be ready sooner, and then their technocrats said, "Oh, whoa, wait a minute. We don't have the infrastructure for this. Let's slow down until we're ready to do something and have a more concrete announcement." There are a lot of ways to look at this.
Well, on the not ready front, Lobo, we did hear from the New Development Bank, which is the financial institution created by the BRICS. And the bank says that there are no immediate plans for the group to create a common currency, according to the Vice President and Chief Financial Officer, Leslie Marsdorp. But they did say that there is a midterm and a long-term plan. So perhaps it's just more of a delay.
And perhaps, word of it got out before they really wanted to. And because it makes so much sense, and because, anybody who's either, antagonistic to the powers that be in the West and wants to believe in bad news for the West, or anybody who's very supportive of the West and is concerned about attacks or possible dangers to the West, either one of those groups could grab hold of this idea and make a much bigger thing out of it than it is. But actually, Michelle, let's take a step back and I remember hearing about this idea early on in my Casey days. I can't put a date on it. I can't tell you what year or day it was that I first heard about a BRICS gold-backed currency. But I know that Doug wrote about it and was thinking about it probably before I even came on board, which is almost 20 years ago. And I remember that this is something we talked about around the proverbial water cooler as a potential tailwind for gold all those years ago. And in my mind, so, the idea has been out there for a long time, is what I'm saying. What was different this time was that people got it in their heads that this was really finally happening. And I think that's really, if anything, the key takeaway that people should remember, Michelle. If you think about it, remember before this, it was Basel III was the thing that was going to make gold go to the moon in a certain date. And it seems like every year or two, there's some big idea like this that everybody gets all excited about. Right. And even if it eventually turns out to be true, it seems like it never lives up to the hype. I mean, Basel III is actually here now, and gold is actually given tier 1 status, and it is done basically squat for the price of gold. So this is the number one rain on the parade, Lobo Tiggre message. I love gold. I love you, gold bugs. But, get a grip and don't let yourself get sold a bill of goods based on some exciting, big idea.
Well, Lobo, as you mentioned, this idea has been around for a while, but it really seemed to gain traction with the weaponization of the dollar, with Russia being kicked off the SWIFT system, with other countries being worried that they could suffer a similar fate, with what many perceive to be weakness from the Biden administration on the global stage, with this overall trend to de-dollarize. All of these factors were sort of coming together to make people feel like this could actually happen this time, or at least progress be made in terms of
and then Russia says and then Russia jumps in on that. These guys aren't dumb. Russia jumps in on exactly that combination of factors that you're talking about, and just, never mind a match to the tinder, they take a blowtorch to it. Like, this is happening.
And remember, Russia also said that they're looking to launch the Moscow gold standard. So that also added some fuel to the speculation here. But because we had all of this talk, there was a lot of excitement there. But you'd think that there would maybe be some reaction to the gold price on the disappointment that it's not happening. There has been no reaction, minimal, if anything. Why is that? We're hearing this news, most likely not going to happen, gold not moving at all on this. What's your take there?
Yeah, this touches on something that I'm often telling my audience, most of whom are dyed-in-the-wool gold bugs. And like me, they love to go down to the local coin shop and pick up a beautiful gold buffalo or something like that on the dips. And we see the whole world in a different way. We see gold as money, JP Morgan, everything else is credit. And the people who set the price of gold that I even just said it wrong. The people whose futures trades on the COMEX or the LME are quoted as the price of gold. That's a mistake. That's not the price of gold. That's what some of these future traders are doing. And those people, very, very few of them, if any of them, I think the way you and I do, or our audience does. They are not gold bugs. They're professional market participants, money traders, gold traders, and they're in there to make their little slice of margin on the trades. And they don't care whether the gold goes up or down. They have no ideological stake in the game at all. And so I don't think those guys or gals were all, excited that in August gold was going to go to the moon because of the BRICS announcement. I think those guys are looking at the DXY, they're looking at the Fed, they're looking at all the same variables that they always look at. And none of that's changed as you and I are speaking, or as this announcement from South Africa came out. None of those other variables that you do see having a high correlation with what I refer to as the gold-dollar exchange ratio instead of the price of gold. It's not surprising to me that it didn't move when the kinds of things that those traders pay attention to didn't move. Now, last week it did, but that's not our topic of today. But I'm saying it fits in this. Is another nail in the coffin of getting too excited about some big idea that makes sense to you, but has no actual connection to what is happening in the marketplace today. If the goal is to be a gold cheerleader and try to save the world by getting everybody back on the gold standard, sure, knock yourself out with a story. But if the goal is to make money, you have to look at what is moving prices, what is moving exchange ratios in the real world right now. And I don't think that was ever this story.
Right, but at the same time, Lobo, and I get your point, that's a very, very valid point. At the same time, we did see record central bank gold purchases also leading up to this, and it seemed to be linked to this move. So if this gold or commodity-backed currency is not happening, what does this mean for that trend of central banks ramping up their gold purchases? I'm
going to agree and disagree. I agree that that's happening, and and that's part of what I'm telling my friend Brent Johnson. That people in that camp say, well, the dollar is still 50 whatever percent, so it's still the global reserve currency. Yeah, but it was 60%, and it was 70% before. So the trend is there. I mean, to my mind, it's very clear that de-dollarization, it's not just a theory, it's not just a big idea. It is a trend in motion right now. But that was happening, or that has been happening before this BRICS gold-backed currency idea came up. So my disagreement is I'm not sure that I see any real link right there right now for this. I think that central banks...
It's been a recent surge. I believe 2022 record gold purchases by central banks. And I think the first quarter of 2023, we had the highest gold purchase by central banks ever recorded.
Yes.
So it seemed to be sort of accelerating, perhaps leading into the BRICS.
No, I don't see it as correlated to this. If you think about it, so we just said the gold-backed currency idea has been around for at least 15 years, maybe more. So, it didn't correlate with that. It's accelerated in the last couple of months because of Russia saying what it said, and now, the other ones. So it didn't correlate with that either. I think it correlated with the war and with Russia getting kicked off the SWIFT system. And this isn't original to me. This isn't my great insight. I think a lot of people will agree with me on this, that, a lot of banks, central banks and governments around the world, they saw that and they're like, oh, wait a minute, even if we're friendly with the United States, we don't want them having the unilateral power to freeze our assets or seize them, or lock us out of the global trade system. So I do think that is connected. That is a real thing. What you've said is exactly true. But I think it started with the SWIFT action, and it's been accumulating since then. Now, here's a key takeaway, though, for our audience out there. I mean, think about this. I don't trust central banks as far as I could throw one. And I think 99.999% of our audience is in the same camp. We don't believe anything these central bankers say. So if I'm a gold bug and I'm going to be bullish on gold because of central bank buying, isn't that a bit of a contradiction? I'm waiting on the bad guys to save me, is what that says. So that's not really a bet I want to place. But
what about the trend at large? Do you see that trend of central banks buying gold continuing? We certainly know that China has continued that, but broadly speaking, you see that continuing.
I do, but it doesn't tell me that gold's going to go up this month. Like, even if over the next decade, Michelle, they continue doing this after what the U.S. did, and everybody got the wake-up call, and they're moving in this direction, that could easily be a decade-long or longer trend. And I believe that will happen. Like, I do believe that. I'm not just positing an argument here. I believe that will happen. But it doesn't tell me what's going to happen next month or next week. And just because central banks are buying, that doesn't mean they're going to buy every day or on a steady basis. Maybe even on a yearly basis, they might not do it. And if they have a need, Russia has done some selling as well. They had to dip into their piggy bank. I would do the same thing if I had I have done the same thing in my past. When I had an emergency, I had to sell some of my bullion. So even if it's true, Michelle, that doesn't tell me that, and sorry, but some of my esteemed peers, they make, this, therefore you must sign up to my newsletter today and find out this one gold stock that only I know about. Even if it's true, that doesn't follow. That it tells us where to invest our money today. And I think that's important for the investor to realize.
We'll get to that later on. Stay tuned, where Lobo thinks you should be investing your money today. But before we get to that, we did discuss the broader de-dollarization trend. You're pretty sure we're not going to get an announcement. It's not even being discussed. Gold-backed currency from the BRICS not happening. But what is happening is they have made it clear they want to trade in their own currencies. And we have seen this trend to de-dollarize accelerate, not just in terms of trade and countries trading amongst themselves using their own currencies, but also, as you just touched on, the dollar's share of international's reserves fell from 73% in 2001 to 58% in 2022. That's according to the IMF. So that's a big drop. That's a substantial drop. Now that this currency is definitely not happening, but the de-dollarization trend continues, at least in terms of countries, as I said, wanting to trade with their own currencies. Does this benefit the dollar?
No. And I think we'll see that in the gold dollar exchange ratio. In fact, right now, as we speak, I see very serious headwinds for gold. The apparent victory of Team Soft Landing is very bearish for gold. And yet we've seen gold prices remain stubbornly around $2,000 for much of this year. And I actually think that central bank buying is a large part of that. There have been times over this year where I thought, gold retreated, say, under 1950, and I thought that was a significant support level, and I didn't see what would hold it. Now it's become a floor, but before it was, there was no reason for it to stay there, and it bounced back. And
on the dollar issue, and I do definitely want to get your outlook on gold, but on the dollar issue,
it touches the dollar issue. It bounced back without the dollar tanking. Now, okay, the dollar has lost ground this year, and I get that. And I guess what I'm saying is on the short-term basis, I'm looking at it daily, weekly, and I'm seeing what's happening. And there were times where it made no sense for gold to rally or recover the way it did, or even just to hold up, and it did. And so if it's not the dollar, if it's not rates, if it's not the usual suspects, then that makes me suspect the central banks. And again, I don't want to trust this, but I think that has been a powerful factor now. And it stems from, I think, not so much the BRICS go-back currency idea, but from the de-dollarization idea. Okay. And so that's, my qualm with that is it doesn't tell me what to do today, Michelle. But in terms of the trend that's going on, I think that's extremely bullish and supportive.
Right. Well, the thinking has always been dollar is cleanest shirt in the dirty laundry basket. And then you had those analysts saying, well, if we do get a currency that's backed by a basket of commodities, it dethrones the dollar. So perhaps in that sense, if this doesn't happen soon, it buys the dollar a little bit more longevity as the king of currencies? Yes,
I would agree, conceptually, yes. But again, the people, COMEX traders who don't listen to you and me in Chicago. The same with the Forex traders. I think very few of them were the pricing, dollar versus euro dollar trade, all these things. I don't think very many of them at all were thinking about, oh my gosh, this gold-backed BRICS currency is going to hurt the dollar. I think they're looking at the relative hawkishness of the ECB versus the Fed. They're looking at the economic statistics that they always look. I mean, I think that's been the driver. And I think you and I have even spoken about this before, that the Fed led the way in tightening. It's currently leading the way in easing. I mean, it's the only one of the major ones that's paused. Well, Canada, and then went back. Anyway, the ECB is still tightening and signaling a much more hawkish tone than the Fed. And the Fed is talking tough, but it has, in fact, paused. And we'll see what happens next week.
Yeah, but before we get to next week, and I want to get your thoughts on that as well, and again, as I said, on gold and of course what to invest in today, but just want to finish getting your thoughts and insight into this whole BRICS phenomenon now, because what we do know is that even if they don't launch a currency, there has been tremendous interest in joining the bloc. So far, more than 40 countries want to join the bloc. 22 countries approached the BRICS formally, submitted requests. According to the comments from the South African ambassador, that there's been tremendous interest in expanding the BRICS. What are your thoughts on this, Lobo? Which countries do you think could be added, if any, and which countries are your top 3 candidates?
Well, that's a bit of a crystal ball question, Michelle, but let me just say one thing to cap the previous one. The answer to the question is similar to why gold didn't move on the South African announcement. I think it's the same answer for the dollar. I wouldn't have expected the dollar to move because the major people trading dollar in the Forex markets, they didn't buy into this story in the first place. It was not on their radar. So countries to join, this isn't something I've given a lot of thought to because I think it's a trend that will happen. I'm convinced that as the new Iron Curtain solidifies and the world reorients, that we're going to see this new East-West division. And anybody who stands to gain from aligning with the other side, there could be candidates, but do you want them? Like, North Korea would be an obvious one to join the axis of evil bloc, right? But, is there much benefit to them from letting North
Saudi
Korea?
Arabia has expressed interest. Saudi Arabia obviously would be a very influential player if it were to join. And
maybe China's the model there. China's clearly antagonistic in an antagonistic relationship with the U.S., but the U.S. is still one of its top two customers, so they have to play nice somewhat, even if they are antagonistic. And Saudi Arabia is still on that boat. Where does it sell most of its oil to? Well, to Western countries. So on the one hand, Biden went over there and he fist bumped a man he called a murderer. And what did he get for that? He got production cuts.
Yeah.
So it's easy to see a country like Saudi Arabia taking the other side. On the other hand, we are their customers. So it's a question of how far you want to go. But
so you don't see the Saudis joining. And by the way, he said, a pariah, I believe were exact words there, and then subsequently went to...
I'm saying I do see somebody like the Saudis joining. Yes, I think that's as good a guess as any. I'm just saying that I could also see people being very cautious before they line up. Because once you take sides like that, there will be consequences.
Okay, but if the group expands, and it looks like it will, and continues to trade amongst itself, and particularly if the Saudis join the party, and we bring in the idea of the petrodollar, how does that impact the dollar?
Well, right. So, it becomes maybe the petro yuan or the petro brick if they do launch their brick currency. So the Saudis are the 800-pound gorilla here of potential candidates for, as much as people want to believe that we're going all green and electric and so on, and we won't need oil anymore, stop oil now, right? I think, rational analysis of the world's energy needs, it comes to the conclusion that we're going to be, oil will be very important for decades to come. And that means the Saudis are going to have a lot of power for decades to come. And so the Saudis joining the bloc and perhaps helping to encourage trading outside and away from the dollar is a big deal. Now, the U.S. not only buys a lot of oil, the U.S. has propped up the kingdom for decades. As part of the original petrodollar deal. We'll protect you. We'll be your army, and you accept payment in dollars. So that would be a watershed event, Michelle. I think if we wake up and Saudi Arabia joins the BRICS alliance, the world will be a different world in a meaningful and significant way. Now, I'm not sure what investment that would change like the next day when that happened. I'd have to see how it played out. But I think that's a big thing you've put your finger on. If that happens, I wouldn't say all bets are off, but I think all bets need to be reconsidered.
Well, that does seem to be a relatively likely outcome of this meeting, at least according to reports out there that the Saudis could.
Now that's different. It's one thing to say they might go there. It's another thing to say they'll do it next month. So that would be quite rocking the boat. You asked for 3 candidates. I don't know if I have a third one, but a second one might be Turkey. I mean, it's clear that Erdogan, he has a little love for the West, and he's playing both sides. So, to me, Turkey seems like a natural fit there, too. And, it's a big country. And, a lot of Americans aren't aware of how big it is and how big a part it plays in natural resources and other parts of markets. It's on Europe's flank. It's a NATO member. That's a big deal.
Yeah. Turkey's been enjoying that position of being able to make decisions regarding new members joining NATO. So it would probably enjoy getting more acclaim and more power if they did join the BRICS there. Let's now go to what you do think is happening more in the near term with regards to gold. Now, earlier this year, we spoke. You did say that you expected there to be a new all-time high for gold this year. You were correct in terms of gold hitting a new high on the COMEX futures market. I think it was 2,080 in May. You're saying these big narratives don't really move the gold markets. This is not what the people trading in gold futures are watching. Given that, what is your outlook for gold? Do you still think gold makes a real all-time high in 2023 beyond the comic speeches?
Real, I'm not sure. I can see another nominal all-time high before the end of this year. So I'm going to double down a bit on you here, Michelle, in that I have two messages. And actually, for my fellow gold bugs out there, I think this is maybe the most important thing I can say in this interview. Here's your headline if you like, I am near-term bearish on gold. I think the advent of the apparent victory of Team Soft Landing, inflation rolled over, yes, I don't believe the CPI numbers, but those are the numbers the comics guys look at, right? So inflation rolled over a year ago, and core inflation has been very sticky, and that finally broke down. If core PCE breaks down as well, in the next report, that will be big. That will be really big. And it will seem like Team Soft Landing is winning, right? Right now, so far, the recession denial is still in full force. So if the Fed is beating inflation without causing the recession, then it will look like that Lobo Tiggre guy was just off his rocker, got it all wrong, everything's fine. Even the bears on Wall Street, the most bearish of the mainstream types that you'll see, they're still calling for a recession, but they keep pushing it back. Oh no, well, it'll be in 2024, early 24. Now it's like late 2024. So they're moving the goalposts there, saying we're not in recession yet and it's been postponed because of these wonderful accidents. I'm actually doubling down, as I say, on the opposite position. I think we're in a recession now. I think it's been masked by the post-COVID distortions. I mean, we had one-offs, once-in-a-century scale events. We had government responses that were literally unprecedented. That's not a metaphor. I mean, it is the literal truth. Yeah. Nobody had ever done anything like that before. So that's not even a 100-year event. That is a first time in history event, some of the things that were done. And amongst other things, this has resulted in labor hoarding, which has caused the labor market, I think, to look stronger than it is. But we also know that there's more people working multiple part-time jobs. There's a lot of factors here that I think support my position. And I think that becomes untenable. I think it disintegrates by itself, even if nothing big happens by the end of this year. I think we'll see the labor market crack in such a way that people start stepping back and say, whoa, something big is happening here. But I also think there's a pretty good chance, almost done, I think there's a pretty good chance that the Fed will break something else. What we saw with the regional banks was just the overture. And I think the odds are that that's already happening. And in the months ahead, there will be headlines about the next thing the Fed broke, and we'll see big changes.
Well, that brings me to the point that I wanted to interject with, and that is last time we spoke, you said you expect the Fed will cut in 2023, that we will see a pivot. And to quote you, Lobo, you said there will be blood in the streets, and that will cause the Fed to cut rates by the end of the year.
Yes.
So
I
it
stand
sounds
by
like you're
that.
sticking to that.
Yes, but it's not like the markets are expecting the Fed to pivot and cut rates because it's going to beat inflation. Mm-hmm. And I'm differing with that. I don't think it's going to beat inflation. Even if it comes down somewhat more, I think it pivots when it breaks something. If I'm wrong, if it doesn't break something, I don't think it pivots. And comes back to what I was saying about most important points in this interview. For the near term, it's going to look like Team Soft Landing is right and Lobo is wrong. And if Team Soft Landing is right without, negative consequences for the Fed, I think that the market is wrong in thinking that the Fed will therefore loosen. I think the higher for longer, that tight policy, I think that stays in place because I think the Fed knows very well the danger that it's in. So that combination is bad for gold. If the Fed pivoted on this news, if Team Soft Landing meant that suddenly the Fed could ease up and there were easier money, that would be bad for the dollar and that would be good for gold. But if there's no recession, if Team Soft Landing seems right about that, while the Fed keeps its foot on the brake pedal, then that would be bad for gold. I am near-term bearish on gold. I think there's a very good chance that this narrative, this appearance of victory against inflation while the Fed keeps rates high, that is classic bearish for gold. I think that sets gold up for a higher levels later, but in the near term, I'm sorry, gold bugs, I don't want to rain on your parade too, but I'm not here to tell you what you want to hear. I'm here to tell you what I think. And to the best of my ability, I think that there is a real danger of downside for gold in the near term, probably hurt silver as well. And maybe the central banks will save us, Michelle. Maybe that central bank buying will prop gold up in spite of this. But I wouldn't count on that.
How bearish? When you say near-term bearish for gold, how bearish?
I'm not calling for a meltdown. I'm calling for continued weakness. I could see it easily breaking below 1900 and scaring the bejesus out of people. I suspect that we would see buying from central banks and other parties then. So I'm not convinced that it would necessarily fall off a cliff. Like there was some floor that if it fell through, it would just crash to 1500 or something. I'm not making that case. But for long-suffering gold bugs who've been saying, oh, the price of gold is high or the gold-dollar exchange ratio is high, why are my stocks low? If you're hoping that your stocks are going to catch up with gold this month or next month, that's a dangerous hope right now because there's a good chance that gold will drop back towards the stocks. And that could actually cause more of a panic in the stocks than in the metal itself. I'm sorry, I don't want to be a prophet of doom or pain here, but if anybody ever thought I was a broken clock that always said gold could only go up, well, here you are. I'm on the record saying I think in the near term, there's a real chance of significant pain for particularly gold stock and silver stock holders.
If the idea that a soft landing has been achieved starts to gain traction, is what you're saying.
Without the Fed pivoting. So there's two parts to that. Right?
Yeah.
If team soft landing seems right and the Fed does pivot, right, it starts easing up while the ECB is still tight and so on. That would actually be very bearish dollar, very bullish for alternatives, including the euro and gold. And that's sort of the mechanic we've seen over the last year. So that would actually be bullish, but I don't think that's going to happen. I suspect that Powell is just all too aware of what happened with his predecessors to ease up on the brake so soon. I think the market is wrong about this. The expectations that mainstream have for easing up sooner, I think are likely to be disappointed, absent something breaking and then crisis mode kicking in.
Okay, but hang on. The soft landing idea, the inflation coming down, seemingly according to government data, I hear what you're saying. That gives Powell the ability to stay fast, to, if needed, cut, but most likely because he's channeling his inner Paul Volcker, as I like to say, he'll probably stick with rates, maybe raise them once or twice more. But you've said that you do still see a cut by 2023.
Yes, because
so
I do expect systemic.
Those two ideas.
So more than channeling his inner Volcker, I think Powell is, if not dead afraid, but seriously averse to appearing to be the next Arthur Burns. Right? Whether he can be Volcker or not, who knows? But he does not want to be Arthur Burns. And inflation coming down, I mean, we're still well above the Fed's target. And people are getting all excited because, okay, we got a 3 handle. 3's not so different from 2. Well, it is 50% above 2, right? So there is a reason for the Fed to say, okay, we've made progress, but we're not there yet. So maybe the Fed continues with its pause. That's a very different thing from cutting rates. The markets are thinking the Fed is winning, therefore it can ease up.
Right.
I'm thinking that the Fed has made, at least according to government statistics, it's made visible progress, and that gives the Fed a reason to continue with its pause. That's very different, and it's not inconsistent with higher for longer. And I really think, Powell doesn't want to be remembered as the next Arthur Burns. If he eases up and then bad things happen, he will be the next Arthur Burns, and he don't want that.
Okay, but you're saying that if the Fed pauses and we're still at very high rates, that still could cause something to break in the system, and then that still creates that blood in the streets, the narrative.
Yes, I'd go beyond that, Michelle. I'd say what they've already done. Even if they did ease up, so let's say they went a quarter basis point reduction in the next meeting. I don't think that's going to happen. Everybody's expecting 25 the other way. That's probably right. But even if they did that, that would not prevent what's already working through the pipeline, like what happened with the regional banks, what's happening right now with high interest rates. We'll have to see exactly where that squeeze comes down hard. Commercial real estate is one of the ones that many people have mentioned. That makes sense to me. But, we didn't see the regional banks coming. We didn't see the gilt thing coming until afterwards they were obvious, right? So I don't want to say that, it's obviously going to be this, that, or the other. But we have a record level of acceleration. From 0 to 500 basis points in a year is, that's throwing the rule book out the window. And maybe I'm wrong, but I just don't see how you can do that without more things breaking. And so we'll see if I'm right. And this won't be a someday, Michelle. Oh yeah, great pumpkin's coming next year. I'm still saying this year, we'll see if I'm right or not.
Okay. And yet you're bearish on gold in the near term. That's where there's the disconnect. If you are right and there is this pivot and there is blood on the streets, you still think it's bad for gold in the near term?
In the nearest term, like in the actual weeks and maybe month or two ahead.
But end of 2023?
Because I think the most probable scenario is it looks like inflation is coming down, but the Fed doesn't ease up and therefore doesn't trash the dollar. So that would be so less safe haven demand while still relatively strong dollar. That would be a bad recipe for gold. Now, ironically, it might actually be a good recipe for silver. If the idea is that everything's fine, team soft landing is right, that Powell saved everybody, everything's fine, well, then silver's industrial side could make it outperform gold in the near term.
Yeah.
That's not a promise, but it is an interesting idea that could actually be in play.
It's an interesting idea, and we've had other guests on the show float a similar scenario. If that's, you have people substantiating that narrative. Okay, Lobo, throughout this interview, we've been discussing future trends and how these big ideas don't necessarily move markets. To quote you, that's not what drives what you should invest in today. So what should people be investing in today, or what are you investing in today?
Uranium. It's simplified even more than the last time you and I spoke. I think last time I said gold, silver, and uranium. Right now, it's just uranium. I'm making sure I keep the right finger up here. It's despite what I just said about silver possibly benefiting, A, it's possibly, and B, the industrial side, I think wax silver, if I'm right about the recession being unmasked, or even if it's less unmasked, it's still there. I'm still looking for a deepening recession, and I do think that weighs on silver. That's why I'm not doubling down on silver, even though I see this potential for silver to outperform gold in the near term. Right now, the only stock on my shopping list is a uranium stock. And I do think that while uranium is not recession-proof, nothing is entirely, I think uranium is much more recession-resistant than other industrial minerals or energy minerals. It's baseload power. It's not discretionary. And there's a whole long conversation we don't have to have. You and I have spoken about it before. There's uranium stuff on my website people can find, or listen to Justin Hune. He can explain it better than me, right? I really believe that thesis. And, uranium's done better than gold this year. Uranium is having a good year. And people are all pulling their hair out because the stocks aren't doing so great. But you know what? At the end of the day, you can't have the metal keep going up without the stocks responding. And I don't see the metal going down significantly. Therefore, I'm extremely bullish on the stocks, even in the nearest term, Michelle.
You mentioned that there's one in particular that you have on your shopping list. Can you share that?
You know better than to ask me that. Well, you can ask. It doesn't hurt to ask. But yes, and I'm actually looking to expand my shopping list. I'm so convinced of this thesis, and some new research we've done has made me even more bullish. It's too long to get into right now. We will have a free uranium report on the website soon. But I'm really very, very keen. It's rare for me to be that excited about something like this. So I'm looking to expand my shopping list right now in uranium only. And then after the recession hits, so after the storms clear for gold, then probably gold comes back into the shopping list. After the recession hits, then silver comes back, copper comes back, maybe lithium, depending on what's going on with cars. But right now, it's very simple. Everything else, there's something I can see in the near term that could whack it hard. And the only one that I don't see something other than, say, another Chernobyl or something, that's not a trend, right? That's a lightning strike. So looking at the trends, uranium is the most solid thesis I have right now. And so that's where I'm looking to deploy cash.
Okay. And you're not willing to share what is on that shopping list.
My kindergarten teacher said that about me too. Doesn't play well with other kids, doesn't share, but here we are.
Okay. I'm just going to throw this out there because you said there's nothing trend-wise that you see derailing the uranium idea. What about this sentiment that we're getting a shift from BlackRock with regards to ESG? The CEO of BlackRock, Larry Fink, he obviously was a big embracer of the ESG mandate. In fact, he was the one that says BlackRock forces companies to change their behaviors. Yes. It seems as though he has now backed away from that idea. He certainly says that the term ESG has been weaponized, but perhaps more interesting is that he has sort of shifted closer to oil. He's added the Aramco CEO, 𝗲𝗄𝗧, to the board this week. Nasser is the head of the world's largest oil producer.
That was such a big shocker that even mainstream media took a step back and were talking about this. Like, whoa, Mr. ESG added Saudi Aramco to the board. What's up with that?
Yeah, and he's made some comment recently that there's room for oil and other assets and other commodities like that. Is that a trend that derails your uranium thesis, perhaps?
Not in the least. Well, in the first place, the world is growing so quickly, it's going to need more energy. As Rick Rule likes to say, I'm sure you've asked him, and he's said oil, yes, coal, yes, gas, yes, uranium, yes. Yes to all of them, because we're going to need them all. There's just not enough. That aside, it's not like this is going to be the end of ESG. And so to the degree that the ESG push helped uranium as a green source of energy, well, that's not going away, Michelle, just because one guy changes his tune a little bit, or one large company.
Well, it's not one guy. This is the world's largest asset manager that buys all of these companies and forces them to follow the ESG narrative. But I get what you're saying. This doesn't necessarily.
One more thing. I mean, the demand side is back to our start of our conversation. The biggest source of demand growth is on the BRICS countries. And, China has a pollution problem and it knows it has to deal with it. And therefore, that's part of their push into nuclear. But, they don't make their decisions based on the latest squishy ESG sentiments and so on. They couldn't care less what BlackRock says or doesn't say about ESG. They're building nuclear power plants as fast as they can. They have scores of them on the books. The demand side for uranium is just, it would take a Chernobyl type event to derail it, I think. I don't think BlackRock, I don't think Obama coming back from the dead and saving everybody. I don't think anything else you could point to besides a major nuclear incident would derail the increasing demand that is not just in theory, but is visibly taking shape and gathering steam right now, Michelle. This is an extremely solid thesis in my view.
Okay. Well, it's always fun to push back and get your response and see
I like that you do that.
And see how committed you are to this idea. And you still have tremendous conviction regarding uranium and tremendous conviction that this gold-backed BRICS currency not happening anytime soon. So thank you, Lobo. Always a pleasure chatting with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Michelle.
All right. And as always, thank you for watching. And a big thank you to our sponsors, Prime XBT. From me, Michelle Makori, and the rest of the team. Keep it right here. We'll see you next time.
Begin your path to financial freedom. Gain up to a $7,000 bonus on us. Register and use promo code. Deposit and enjoy a 7% bonus. Available now. Link in the description.